hadn't seen him in 8 years, and the first thing he said to me was, "I still think about that night." Not hello, not how have you been, just that. Quiet, honest, and loaded with everything we never finished. I was standing in line at a small coffee shop near the river, killing time before a meeting I didn't really care about, when I heard my name spoken in that voice, lower than most people's, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten before my brain could catch up. I turned around, and there he was. Ethan looked older, obviously. So did I. There were faint lines near his eyes, a little gray at his temples. He probably pretended not to notice. But the rest of him was painfully the same. The posture, the way he stood like he was always bracing for something, the half smile he wore when he wasn't sure if he was welcome. For a split second, neither of us moved. It felt like the world politely stepped back and gave us space. "Hey," I finally said. "Hey," he replied, and then he laughed under his breath like he couldn't believe this was happening either. We hadn't planned this. We lived in different cities now, different lives. I'd convinced myself, very successfully, that he belonged to a past version of me, one I had outgrown, one I had survived. But seeing him there, holding a paper cup and looking at me like he was afraid I might disappear again, unraveled that story fast. We did the awkward small talk first. The safe stuff. Jobs. Cities. Weather level updates, pretending we hadn't once known each other's bodies better than our own beds. Pretending we hadn't loved each other in that reckless early 20s way where you think love alone can fix timing, fear, and immaturity. "You want to sit?" he asked, gesturing to a small table by the window. "If you're not in a rush." I was. But I shook my head anyway. We sat, silence stretched. Not uncomfortable, just heavy, the kind that carries history. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," he said. "I thought I wanted that," I replied, surprising myself with how easily the truth came out. His eyes flicked up to mine at that. We broke up badly, not explosively. No cheating, no screaming. Just two men who loved each other and still managed to hurt each other deeply. He was scared to come out fully. I was tired of waiting. We both said things we couldn't take back. And then one day, we stopped fighting and just stopped talking. I'd dated since then, loved even, but nothing had ever landed quite right after him. "I was an idiot," Ethan said quietly. "Back then," I exhaled. "Yeah, we both were," he nodded, fingers tightening slightly around his cup. "But I meant what I said earlier. I still think about that night, the last one." So did I. The way we held each other like we knew it was ending. The way neither of us said, "Don't go out loud." Outside, the river kept moving like nothing important was happening at all. "I don't know what this is," I said slowly, "but I'm not sure it's nothing." Ethan met my gaze, something cautious but hopeful settling between us. "Can we not decide yet?" he asked. "Just see?" And in that moment, I realized the most dangerous thing about second chances wasn't the risk of getting hurt again. It was remembering how good it once felt and wondering if it still could. I checked my phone out of habit, like I might suddenly remember an obligation important enough to pull me away. There wasn't one, just a meeting I could reschedule, and a feeling in my chest that hadn't been there in years. "So," I said, leaning back in the chair, "what does see look like to you?" Ethan smiled faintly. Coffee was step one. I didn't think I'd get this far. That made me laugh. A real one. God, I'd missed that. How easily he could still pull it out of me. We talked longer than either of us planned. About the breakup, finally, without sharp edges. About the stuff we never said back then, because we were too busy protecting our pride. He told me he'd come out to his parents 3 years ago. I told him I'd moved cities twice, trying to outrun memories that apparently had better stamina than me. "At some point," he said, staring out the window, "I realized I wasn't scared of being gay. I was scared of being seen. Fully." I nodded. That tracked. It always had. When we stood to leave, there was that moment again. That pause where you don't know if a hug is too much or not enough. He solved it by stepping in first, wrapping his arms around me carefully, like I might break. I didn't. I held him back, breathing him in, and for half a second my body reacted like no time had passed at all. Same warmth, same pull. "Dinner?" he asked softly when we pulled apart. "Not today, but soon?" I hesitated just long enough to feel the weight of it. "Yeah," I said, "soon." That night I lay awake replaying everything. The way his voice had steadied when he talked about growth. The way he still watched my face when I spoke. Like he cared about every word. I told myself to be careful. Second chances come with sharper consequences. 2 days later we met for dinner. Nothing fancy. A quiet place where the lights were low and the tables were close enough to make everything feel intimate without trying. We didn't rush this time. We talked about stupid things. Music. Bad dates. The weird comfort of routines you never expected to build alone. At one point, his knee brushed mine under the table. Neither of us moved it away. Outside, the air was cool, the city humming around us. We stood on the sidewalk like teenagers who didn't want the night to end. "I'm not asking for promises," Ethan said, serious now. "I just want honesty, even if it's messy." I swallowed. That was new. Old Ethan avoided mess. Old me did too. "I can do honesty," I said. "I can't do pretending anymore." His smile was slow, genuine. Good. When he kissed me, it wasn't urgent. It wasn't desperate. Just soft, deliberate, like we were testing something fragile and real. My hand found his waist without thinking, muscle memory kicking in. But my heart was fully present this time. As we pulled back, foreheads touching, I realized something that scared me more than losing him ever did. I wasn't mourning what we used to be anymore. I was curious about what we could become. The next few weeks felt unreal in the quietest way possible. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just consistency. We started texting. At first it was practical. "Did you eat? You free Thursday?" But it didn't take long before it slipped into something warmer. Inside jokes resurfaced, like they'd been waiting underwater this whole time. He still sent voice notes instead of typing when he was tired. I still overthought my replies, and then pretended I didn't. We took it slow on purpose. That was the unspoken rule. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew how fragile this was. Like picking up something that had once shattered and realizing you had to hold it differently now. Our third date wasn't really a date. We walked through a weekend market, hands occasionally brushing, pretending that wasn't deliberate. He bought bread he didn't need. I bought a plant I'd probably kill. It felt domestic in a way that scared me more than intimacy ever had. "Can I ask you something?" he said as we sat on a bench eating overpriced pastries. "Depends," I replied. "Is it going to emotionally wreck me?" He smiled and sobered. "Did you ever hate me?" I didn't answer right away. The honest version deserved time. "No," I said finally. "I was angry, hurt, but I never hated you. I hated how much I still wanted you when you were gone." He nodded like he'd expected that. Same. That night, he walked me home. We stood outside my building longer than necessary, the way people do when they don't want to cross an invisible line yet. "I'm not asking to come in," he said, reading my hesitation easily. "Just wanted to say I'm glad this is happening." "So am I," said, and I meant it, even with the fear humming underneath. The first time he did come inside was a week later. No candles, no music. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first like idiots, talking about a show neither of us was really watching. At some point, he shifted closer. My body reacted instantly, but my mind stayed calm, present. When he kissed me this time, it lingered, still gentle, but deeper. His hand rested on my thigh, warm and steady, like he was asking permission without words. I covered his hand with mine. That was all it took. We didn't rush into anything. We shared quiet moments. We laughed when we bumped noses. When he rested his forehead against mine, eyes closed, I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for years. "This feels different," he murmured. "It is different," I said. "We are." He stayed the night. We slept tangled together, fully clothed, like teenagers again, But this time, it wasn't about restraint. It was about choosing to savor something we once took for granted. In the morning, I watched him make coffee in my kitchen like he belonged there, like he'd always belonged there. That scared me. Second chances aren't loud. They don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, asking if you've learned enough to not ruin them this time. And standing there, watching the man I once lost move through my space like he was careful not to break anything, including me, I realized something terrifying and hopeful all at once. I wasn't just falling for him again, I was letting him stay. Letting him stay turned out to be the hardest part, not because of anything Ethan did. If anything, he was careful to a fault, but because the longer he stayed, the more obvious it became how much space he was quietly taking up in my life again. Toothbrush by the sink, shoes by the door, his jacket draped over the chair like it had always belonged there. One morning, as he was pulling on his socks, he paused and looked at me with that thoughtful expression I remembered too well. "You ever get the feeling," he said, "that we're walking on glass?" I sat up in bed, sheets twisted around my waist. "Yeah, every day," he nodded. "Me too. I just don't want us to confuse being careful with being afraid." That hit harder than I expected. Because the truth was, I was afraid, not of him leaving again, but of discovering that I needed him more than I was willing to admit. Back then, losing him had cracked something open in me. I'd spent years building emotional guardrails, convincing myself independence was the same thing as safety. Ethan was quietly dismantling that. A month in, we finally talked about the past the way we never had before. No defensiveness, no rehearsed speeches, just honesty. "I didn't choose you when I should have," he said one night, voice steady but eyes glassy. "And I don't expect forgiveness for that. I just want you to know I understand it now." I didn't answer immediately. I was staring at our hands on the table, fingers intertwined without thinking. "I don't need you to punish yourself forever," I said. "But I need to know you won't disappear when things get hard." "I won't," he said immediately. Then, softer, "And if I ever start to, I want you to call me out." That was new too. Accountability. Growth that didn't feel performative. We still argued sometimes. Small things. Miscommunications. Old habits trying to resurface. But now, instead of pulling away, we leaned in. Awkwardly, imperfectly, but intentionally. One night, after a stupid disagreement about nothing important, he stayed quiet longer than usual. I watched him pace my living room before finally stopping in front of me. "I love you," he said, like he was placing something fragile between us. I never stopped. But I love you differently now. Better. My chest tightened. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head for weeks, always unsure how it would feel. When I said it back, it didn't feel like jumping off a cliff. It felt like coming home. The realization came slowly after that. This wasn't about fixing the past or rewriting our story. It was about accepting that we were two people who'd grown separately and still chose each other again, eyes open this time. Second chances aren't about proving love never died. They're about discovering it survived and deciding, together, to treat it like something worth protecting. The first real test didn't come from us. It came from the world outside, the one that hadn't paused while we were figuring ourselves out. Ethan got the call on a Tuesday evening. I knew something was wrong the moment his phone stopped ringing and he didn't move. Just stood there in my kitchen, staring at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. "My company wants me to transfer," he said finally. 6 months, maybe more. My stomach dropped. "Where?" "Chicago." Of course it was. A clean, respectable distance. Not far enough to be dramatic, not close enough to pretend it wouldn't matter. We sat on the couch in silence after that, his arm around my shoulders, my cheek pressed to his chest. This felt cruelly familiar. Life testing us right when things started to feel solid. "I told them I need time," he said. "I haven't said yes." I pulled back to look at him. "Don't decide based on me." "I'm not," he said quickly. Then he corrected himself. "Okay, not only on you, but you're part of my life now. I'm not pretending you're not." That was the difference. Years ago, he would have made the decision alone and informed me afterward like an afterthought. This time, he was scared and present. We didn't fight. We talked. Long, honest conversations that stretched past midnight. About fear. About resentment. About how distance had once destroyed us, because neither of us knew how to stay emotionally close. "I don't want to lose you again," I admitted one night, voice barely above a whisper. "And I don't want to become someone who asks you to shrink your life for me." He took my face in his hands. "You're not asking, and I'm not running, either way." In the end, he took the transfer, and I didn't feel abandoned. We planned. Visits. Calls. Ordinary things made intentional. The goodbye at the airport hurt, but it didn't break me. He kissed me slow and steady, forehead pressed to mine, like a promise. "This isn't the end," he said. "I know," I replied, and I did. Distance taught us something proximity never had. How to choose each other without convenience. How to miss without spiraling. How to trust growth instead of fearing it. 6 months later, when he came back, really back, it didn't feel like a reunion. It felt like continuation. Second chances don't always come wrapped in certainty. Sometimes they ask you to trust the quiet proof instead of grand gestures. And standing there, watching Ethan unpack boxes into an apartment we chose together, I finally understood what we'd been given. Not a redo. A future. Moving in together didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like exhaling. The apartment was nothing special. Second floor, decent light, neighbors who played music a little too loud on weekends. But the first night we slept there, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and mismatched furniture, I lay awake listening to Ethan breathe beside me and thought, so this is what choosing looks like. Not dramatic, not perfect, just steady. There were moments that caught me off guard, seeing him brush his teeth next to me in the morning, sleepy and unguarded. Arguing over where to put the couch, and realizing we were both smiling halfway through. The quiet intimacy of grocery shopping, of knowing which cereal he'd reach for without asking. One night, months later, we ran into someone who knew us before. An old mutual friend. Casual conversation. Polite smiles. Then the inevitable, "Wow, you two again." I felt Ethan tense beside me. Old reflexes. "Yeah," I said before he could answer. "Again, but better." On the walk home, Ethan squeezed my hand. "Thank you." For what? For not acting like this is something we need to explain. That was when it really hit me. The past no longer owned us. It informed us. Sure, but it didn't define what we were building. We still talked about the breakup sometimes, not with pain, but with curiosity. Like two people examining an old scar, acknowledging it without reopening the wound. "I think we needed to lose each other," he said once, lying on his back staring at the ceiling. Not because we didn't love each other, but because we didn't know how. I turned onto my side, resting my head on his chest. "Yeah, I don't think this version of us could have existed back then." His arm tightened around me. "I'm glad it exists now." The night he said he wanted a future with me really said it. There was no speech, just a quiet moment on the balcony, city lights flickering below us. "I don't want to imagine my life without you in it," he said. "Not because I'm afraid to be alone, but because I don't want to be." That was the moment I knew. Second chances aren't about fate or timing magically fixing everything. They're about two people doing the work, choosing honesty over comfort, presence over fear. We didn't fall back into love. We walked into it, eyes open, hands linked, aware of the cost and willing to pay it. And this time, when I looked at him, I wasn't scared of losing him. I was certain of staying. The thing nobody tells you about happiness is how quiet it can be. Not boring, just calm. Like a lake early in the morning, smooth enough that you start noticing small ripples you used to miss. That's what life with Ethan became. Not perfect, not free of doubt, just real. The biggest shift happened one random Sunday. We were cleaning the apartment, music playing low, windows open. I was wiping down the counter when I noticed Ethan standing still in the hallway, holding an old photo album he'd unpacked without realizing it was that one. us. Years ago, younger, softer, reckless. I forgot I still had this, he said quietly. I walked over, leaned against the wall beside him. We flipped through it together. College parties. Bad haircuts. A picture of us on that road trip where everything started to crack, but neither of us admitted it yet. I was so sure back then, I said. About everything. He smiled sadly. I was sure about nothing, and pretended that made me strong. We stood there for a long time. Then he closed the album and slid it back onto the shelf. Not hiding it, not clinging to it either, just placing it where it belonged. Later that night, lying in bed, he turned to me suddenly. "Do you ever worry," he asked, "that one day we'll wake up and realize this was just nostalgia?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about it honestly. "No," I said. Nostalgia doesn't argue about bills. It doesn't sit through hard conversations. It doesn't change. He exhaled like he'd been holding that question for a while. The future didn't arrive with fireworks either. It crept in slowly. Talks about pets, about family, about cities we might live in someday, about what commitment actually meant now, that it wasn't just a word we threw around. One night, months later, he asked me to come with him to a work event. Nothing big, just a dinner, but it was the first time he introduced me without hesitation. "This is my partner," he said. Not boyfriend, not someone he was seeing. Partner. Something in my chest settled permanently at that word. When we got home, I teased him about it. He shrugged, smiling. Just felt accurate. The truth was, we didn't need a big ending to prove anything. No dramatic proposal, no sweeping declarations. Just this steady understanding that we were building something that could hold weight. Second chances don't come with guarantees. They come with choice, with effort, with the courage to stay when leaving would be easier. Years ago, we loved each other but didn't know how to stay. Now, standing in the quiet of a life we built deliberately, I finally understood the difference. Love didn't come back to us. We learned how to keep it. The ending didn't come on a milestone date. It came on a normal night. We were sitting on the floor of the living room, backs against the couch, eating takeout straight from the containers. The TV was on but muted, forgotten. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Everything felt ordinary in the best possible way. Ethan nudged my foot with his. "You ever think about how close we came to never doing this again?" "All the time," I said, usually when I'm trying not to think about it. He smiled, then grew thoughtful. "I used to believe love was supposed to feel intense all the time. Like if it didn't hurt a little, it wasn't real." I glanced at him. "And now I think love is what stays when the intensity fades, what shows up the next morning, and the one after that." I let that sink in. Years ago, I would have clung to that moment, afraid to name it, afraid it might vanish if I did. But now, I just felt it, solid and unshakable. Later, as we got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror while he brushed his teeth behind me. I looked calm, happy in a way that didn't ask for validation. When we climbed into bed, he reached for my hand automatically, not to pull me closer, just to touch me, to stay connected. "I don't want to lose this," he said quietly into the dark. I turned onto my side, facing him. "Then don't disappear." "I won't," he said. No hesitation, no fear, just certainty. And I believed him, not because I needed to, but because he'd earned it. That was the real ending. Not a ring, not a grand speech, just two men who had once loved each other badly and learned, the hard way, how to love each other well. We didn't get a perfect story. We got a true one. A second chance that wasn't about erasing mistakes, but about growing beyond them. About choosing each other, not because it was familiar, but because it was right. As I drifted off to sleep, his breathing steady beside me, I realized something simple and profound. The feelings never disappeared. They just waited for us to become the kind of people who could finally hold them.